This is the last video on the 19th century, and we are going to be looking at the factory and social reformers who fought to improve the lives of working people in Britain. So as I've mentioned in previous videos, 19th century Britain saw crazy social and economic change during the Industrial Revolution. Millions of people moved from the countryside into cities and towns to work in these new factories. Now, with this mass movement of people into the cities, these new industrial centres became overcrowded, unsanitary, and often dangerous places to live. Factory conditions were harsh. You could be working 12 to 16 hours a day in unsafe jobs with low pay. And because there were so many workers available, owners could easily replace you as there were people in the countryside ready to take your job. To make things worse, many children had to work in factories too. They were seen as valuable assets because they were small enough to fit into machinery and they could be paid much less. Bottom line, social conditions were not good. Now, not everyone agreed on whether the government should step in to change things. At the time, Britain's government was dominated by wealthy landowners and industrial businessmen, and many were resistant to reforming working and living conditions. There were two main views. On the one hand, some believed in self-help or laissez-faire, meaning let them do in French, with the belief that the government should not interfere in people's personal lives. Supporters argued that if people worked hard enough and were responsible, they could improve their own lives. Then, on the other hand, you have those who believed in government help. This said that people, through no fault of their own, were born into disadvantaged circumstances, and that it was the duty of the state to intervene and right the wrongs in society. In this video, we will be looking at three famous reformers of 19th century Britain. First up is Anthony Ashley Cooper, known better as Lord Shaftesbury. Shaftesbury was born into an aristocratic British family and had a political career of almost 50 years, serving in both the House of Commons and the House of Lords. Driven by his devout Christian faith, he campaigned passionately to help marginalised groups in Britain. He is probably best remembered for factory reform, as in 1833 he led a movement inside Parliament to change conditions of factories in Britain. He pushed for nearly 15 years for the Factory Act of 1847, also known as the 10 Hours Act, which limited the number of hours women and children in textile mills could work to 10 hours a day. In 1842, he also helped to pass the Mines and Collieries Act, which banned women and children under 10 from working underground in the mines. His reforms went beyond just working conditions, as he also worked on housing reform, improving care for people with mental illnesses, promoting education for the poor, and even animal welfare. He was quite the man. It was said during the revolutions across Europe in 1848, Queen Victoria remarked that if it wasn't for Shaftesbury's work with the poor and homeless, then the revolution would have spread to Britain. Our second reformer is Elizabeth Fry, who worked on prison reform in Britain. Elizabeth Fry was also born into an aristocratic family and was devoted to her Christian beliefs in her Quaker upbringing, which had values such as equality and compassion for people. Britain's legal system was famously harsh. Under the so-called Bloody Code, a list of around 200 crimes you could commit that were punishable by death, including petty crimes like stealing bread. In 1813, she visited Newgate Prison in London and was horrified by what she saw. 300 men, women and children cramped together in filthy, overcrowded conditions. Guards were often abusive, and Fry described the prison as hell above ground. She was particularly concerned with the women and children, and she returned the next day with food and clothing for them. Over time, she started to change Newgate. She set up a school for prisoners' children, pushing for separating male and female prisoners, as well as separating minor offenders from serious criminals. Elizabeth Fry became the first woman ever to present evidence to a parliamentary committee and argued that prisoners should be taught practical skills to prepare them for life after prison. Her work influenced several prison reform acts, and her recommendations did not only lead to prison reform in Britain, but also across Europe. Last but not least, we have Robert Owen, who, unlike the others, came from humble beginnings. He made his money being involved in the booming cotton industry in Manchester, and he later moved to Scotland, taking over a textile mill at New Lanark. Unlike most factories in Britain, at New Lanark, workers were treated well. They were provided with housing, food and clothing, and Owen reduced harsh punishments, as he believed that the better conditions would create a happier and more productive workforce. Owen argued that people were shaped by their environment, improved their conditions and their behaviour and economic productivity would actually improve. The profits made at New Lanark would partly be used to fund a free school for the workers' children, the first infant school in Britain in 1816. In 1817, he campaigned for an 8-hour working day in Parliament, stating 8 hours for work, 8 hours for recreation, and 8 hours for rest. And this is the model most working people in Britain use today. So we've looked at 3 case studies of 19th century reformers: Lord Shaftesbury's factory and social reforms, Elizabeth Fry fighting for prison reform, and Robert Owen, who promoted better working conditions. You can also see different themes driving these figures. Shaftesbury and Fry were driven by their Christian faith and moral beliefs, and Owen also saw the economic argument of higher productivity. Although laws were passed and life did slowly improve for workers during the 19th century, hardship and inequality still remained. In a later video, we will look at the trade union movement and see how working people continue their struggle into the 20th century with the general strike of 1926. See you then.